Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They kicked a pregnant woman out of her own home. No warning, no rights, just 3 men, a lie, and an HOA drunk on power. What followed was not just a fight to reclaim a house, but a war that would shake the nation and bring down an empire built behind picket fences. I've always taken pride in securing my home. After serving overseas and spending over a decade in private security, I don't leave things to chance, especially when it comes to my family. Our house, nestled at the far end of the cul-de-sac in northwestern Travis County, had been ours for a little over 3 years. Paid in full, title clean. It was supposed to be the place where Jessica and I would finally stop moving, settle down, and raise our daughter. She was 7 months pregnant when it happened. I wasn't even in town. I'd left 2 days earlier for a short contract gig in Austin, corporate security consulting for a hotel hosting some pharmaceutical conference. It wasn't my usual tempo, but it paid well and only took 72 hours of my time. Jessica had insisted I go. "You know I'll be fine," she said that morning, rubbing her belly and smiling. "I've got snacks, I've got Netflix, and I've got the neighbors watching out." I kissed her and left, never imagining I'd get the call I did. It was the second afternoon, around 4 o'clock. My phone rang while I was wrapping up a briefing on evacuation protocols. I didn't recognize the number at first. When I answered, it was our neighbor Derek from 2 houses down. His voice was strained and low, like he was trying not to be overheard. "Mark, man, you need to get back here. Something's happening at your house. I don't know how to say this, but they kicked Jessica out. These HOA people. They just showed up with a couple of goons and locked her out." I remember thinking it was some sort of prank, but Derek didn't sound like he was joking. He sounded shaken. "They said she was living there illegally," he added. "That the house was under HOA authority now. She was crying, man. They put her stuff on the curb like she was some squatter." The call ended with me bolting out of the hotel conference room and racing to my truck. I drove 200 miles in under 3.5 hours, breaking every speed suggestion the state of Texas has ever given. Jessica didn't answer her phone. Derek didn't answer again either. My mind was doing loops. Who the hell touches a pregnant woman? Who in their right mind throws someone out of a house they don't own? By the time I turned onto our street, it was twilight. The air was thick with dust and August heat. I saw the pile of bags before I saw her, our things scattered like trash across the lawn. And Jessica. She was sitting on the neighbor's porch, wrapped in a throw blanket, cheeks red from crying, stomach prominent beneath one of my old t-shirts. The look on her face when she saw me could have torn a man in half. I didn't speak. I just pulled over, left the engine running, and walked straight toward our front door. There they were. 3 guys in gray polos and tactical boots, standing in front of my house like it belonged to them. One of them, the tallest, stepped forward. "You're trespassing on HOA property," he said, arms folded. I stopped. "That's my house," I said slowly. "Where is my wife?" "She's been removed," he replied. "The HOA board voted to enforce a resolution. This property is now under Crescent Mesa Ridge jurisdiction due to improper occupancy and unpaid compliance violations." I laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that has no humor in it. "I'm not a member of Crescent Mesa Ridge. This house isn't under HOA jurisdiction. I've got the deed, title, and every goddamn legal document to prove it." "Sir, if you don't step back, we'll have to contact law enforcement," said the second guy, one hand drifting toward a radio on his belt. No badge, no nameplate, not even the decency to pretend to be real security. I took a breath, and then I walked forward. They tried to block me. Bad move. The first guy reached for my shoulder and didn't see my elbow until it connected. The second one swung. He was faster, but I was angrier. I dropped him to the ground with a blow to the ribs. The third tried to grab me from behind. He got a knee to the gut for the effort. I wasn't trying to kill anyone, but I wasn't about to be stopped either. The commotion brought out more neighbors. I heard someone shouting to call 911. Jessica was trying to get up from the porch, screaming my name. One of the guys I'd put down was groaning and clutching his shoulder. Sirens came fast, real fast, as if they were already nearby. Maybe they were. Maybe that witch had called them ahead of time. 2 cruisers pulled up, and within seconds, I had guns drawn on me. I dropped to my knees with my hands in the air. One of the cops yelled at me to lie down. I did. I wasn't about to get shot over my own house. Jessica tried to explain. Derek tried too. A few neighbors murmured support. Others stayed quiet, but the officers didn't listen. One of them was already pulling my arms behind my back, zip-tying my wrists. "You're under arrest for aggravated assault," one of them said. "You have the right to remain silent." I wanted to scream. Instead, I bit my tongue until it bled. They shoved me into the back of the cruiser. I caught one last look at Jessica, crying again, this time from a place deeper than fear. And standing in front of our house, my house, was a woman in a navy blazer and a smug expression. Karen Stryker, HOA president, local tyrant, and apparently the self-declared owner of my damn life. Jail in Travis County is not the worst place I've ever been. Afghanistan holds that title, but I'll say this. It's humiliating when you know you've done nothing wrong, and they still strip you of your dignity like you're the damn villain. They held me overnight in a freezing holding cell with a flickering light and a guy who smelled like he'd lost a bet with a bottle of gin. I didn't sleep. I didn't speak. I stared at the wall and replayed the moment Jessica screamed my name as they zip-tied my wrists. Her voice, raw, scared, pregnant, and alone, that stayed in my ears longer than the sound of the sirens. The next morning, I was given a phone and one call. I used it to dial Randall Price, my old boss turned lawyer, former district attorney, now private defense attorney for people like me, people who get bulldozed by people like Karen. I didn't have to say much. He'd already heard. "I'll have you out by this evening," he said. "Keep your mouth shut until then. This isn't over." He wasn't wrong. Jessica had already filed a report. She'd gone down to the sheriff's office that same night, still in my t-shirt, still shaking. She'd spoken with a female officer, Detective Allen, who actually listened, who saw the bruises on her arms and the indentation around her wrist from where one of the men had grabbed her. She gave a full statement, provided our property deed, and named every man who'd laid a hand on her. I was released on bail late that afternoon. Jessica was waiting in the car looking pale but fierce. She gripped the steering wheel like she wanted to break it in half. When I got in, she didn't cry this time. She just said, "We're burning them down." We didn't go home. We went straight to Randall's office in downtown Austin. The man hadn't changed since the last time I saw him. Gray, sharp-eyed, always in a suit that somehow made him look like he carried his own courtroom around with him. He poured us coffee, sat back in his chair, and listened. He asked questions. He took notes. Then he opened a folder on his desk that was already 2 inches thick. "I started digging the moment I saw your name on the arrest log," he said. "Your neighborhood's HOA, Crescent Mesa Ridge, is already on my radar. They've had 4 complaints in the last 6 months, all similar patterns, expanding territory, fraudulent violations, bullying tactics." Randall laid out a plan. First, we'd file a civil suit for illegal eviction, assault, emotional distress, and property damage. Second, we'd pressure the police to investigate the HOA's use of force. Those men weren't registered security, not licensed, and certainly not authorized to enforce anything. Third, we'd push for an injunction to regain access to our home. "But that house," Jessica started, her voice cracking for the first time. Randall looked at her. "We're going to get it back, I promise." The media hadn't picked up the story yet. But that changed the next day. Someone posted Derek's video online. It showed everything. The moment the men arrived, their attempt to coerce Jessica at the front door, her begging them to leave. The angle was grainy, but it caught the way one of them grabbed her arm and dragged her down the steps. Her scream, her belly, the sound of the door slamming shut as they changed the locks. Within hours, it went viral. By noon, local Austin news stations were outside our attorney's office shoving microphones in my face. I didn't talk. Jessica didn't either. But Randall did. He gave one hell of a statement, measured, composed, but ruthless. A pregnant woman was dragged out of her own home by individuals with no legal authority, he said. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is an attack on private property rights. My client is not a member of the HOA, nor is his property under their jurisdiction. This was trespass. This was force. And we will pursue every avenue of justice available." That night, we stayed in a motel off I-35. The bed was too hard, the pillows too soft, and I couldn't stop checking the lock on the door. Jessica curled into my chest, breathing slow and shallow. Our daughter kicked once, and we both froze like we were afraid of breaking. "This isn't just about us anymore," she said into the dark. "They think they can do this to anyone." I kissed her forehead. Then they picked the wrong house to start with. The next morning, Randall filed our civil suit. 32 pages, attached with video, images, and Jessica's medical report. We filed criminal complaints as well. Battery, unlawful entry, threats of violence, attempted wrongful eviction. Randall included a request to freeze all HOA enforcement actions until the court sorted jurisdiction. By midday, a second video surfaced, body cam footage from one of the hired guards. He must have been wearing it for intimidation or insurance in case we sued. But the idiot had forgotten to turn it off. The footage showed them laughing before entering our property. One of them joked about teaching the squatter a lesson. When Jessica refused to open the door, another said, "We'll get her out. Watch this." They didn't read her any notice. They didn't present ID. They didn't give her a chance. That footage was leaked to a local investigative journalist at KXAN News. By the end of the day, the headline was everywhere. Pregnant woman forcibly evicted from her own home. HOA overreach or criminal enterprise. And just like that, our fight wasn't private anymore. When I opened my eyes the next morning, I knew something had changed. Not inside me. I'd been running hot since the day they touched Jessica, but out there, in the world. The motel TV was playing the news before I even turned it on. A reporter stood in front of our house, the Crescent Mesa Ridge HOA sign behind her, half blocked by crime scene tape. The headline across the screen read, "Outrage grows after viral HOA eviction. Woman 7 months pregnant thrown from home." They ran the footage. Again and again. Local news picked it up. Then regional. Then someone from NBC called Randall's office. A CNN legal analyst tweeted the video with the caption, "If this happened to my wife, there'd be war." There already was. Jessica had barely touched her breakfast, but her eyes were locked on the screen. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked focused, calm in that eerie hurricane eye kind of way. "I want to testify," she said. "I don't want you stressed." They dragged me off my own porch, Mark, with your name on the deed and my name on the mailbox. That wasn't stress. That was war. We drove back into the city and walked straight into the sheriff's department. Detective Allen met us personally, said she'd been reviewing the footage, and brought in a DA rep to take Jessica's full statement. They walked her through every minute, where she stood, what they said, what she felt. I sat outside, fists clenched in my lap, listening to my wife explain, again, how 3 men forced her onto the concrete while she screamed that she was pregnant. They took photos of her arms, her wrist, her back. The bruises had darkened overnight. One of the officers murmured something about absolutely excessive force, and I saw a twitch in his jaw like he was trying not to say what he really thought. The detective asked if we had video from inside the house. We didn't, but that night we got a message from someone unexpected, one of the guards. Not the tall one, not the guy who laughed. The third one, the kid. His name was Joel. He messaged me through a burner Facebook account and asked if we could meet in private. I agreed. Public library, broad daylight, cameras everywhere. Randall came with me, of course. Joel looked like he hadn't slept. Couldn't have been older than 24. He sat across from us, eyes on the table, voice low. "I didn't know what we were doing was illegal," he said. "She just told us it was enforcement, said they were squatters, that we had board approval, and that the cops were on her side." "She, Karen?" I asked. He nodded. "She had papers, said the guy was ex-military, maybe dangerous, and that the woman was pretending to live there while it was under dispute. She paid us cash, no contracts, just uniforms and an address." Randall leaned in. "Would you be willing to give a formal statement? Sign an affidavit?" Joel hesitated, then nodded. "I'll do it. I can't sleep, man. I keep seeing her fall." That was all we needed to file our next motion, a formal declaration from someone inside the event, confirming that the so-called enforcement team was acting on verbal orders from Karen Stryker with no legal foundation, no credentials, and no oversight. Meanwhile, the media storm got worse. For them. One of the HOA board members, a woman named Lila Monroe, resigned publicly in the middle of a community town hall. She took the microphone, hands shaking, and said, "I didn't sign up for this. We were never shown those documents. I never voted to approve enforcement." 2 days later, another board member followed suit. Then a third. One of them confessed in a private email, later leaked, that Karen had bypassed the board entirely, forging signatures and calling it a crisis protocol. Randall submitted a demand for immediate injunctive relief. The court responded fast. Too many eyes on the case now. A judge ordered that we be granted re-entry into our property pending full investigation and that Crescent Mesa Ridge HOA cease all enforcement activity immediately. We got back into our house 3 weeks after the eviction. It wasn't the same. The locks had been changed twice. Furniture was out of place. Jessica's clothes had been thrown into trash bags and dumped in the garage. Her prenatal vitamins were gone. Our ultrasound photos were missing from the fridge. I found a coffee mug I'd gotten in Kuwait shattered in the trash can. Jessica stood in the living room, hands on her belly, staring at the floor. "They touched everything," she whispered. I nodded. Not for long. That same evening, a local advocacy group for homeowners' rights reached out to us. They'd seen the story, followed the updates, and wanted to help. "This could set precedent," the organizer told me over the phone. "This is bigger than just one rogue HOA. We've had over 100 reports in the last year, wrongful citations, forced fees, intimidation, but no one ever caught them in the act like this." They weren't the only ones watching. The New York Times reached out through a journalist named Evan Shaw. Said he was working on a long-form piece about the abuse of power by private HOAs in the United States. I agreed to talk. I told him everything. The first thing I did when we got back into the house, after checking every room, every window, and every lock, was replace the entire security system, cameras, sensors, the works. I wasn't going to sleep under a roof where someone could just walk in, drag my wife out, and laugh while doing it. Not again. Jessica didn't say much that first night. She just sat in our bedroom with the door closed, stroking her belly in silence. I watched her from the hallway for a while before I finally sat down beside her. "I feel like I don't recognize this place anymore," she said softly. "I'll make it ours again," I said, "even if I have to tear the walls down and rebuild them." But it wasn't just about reclaiming a house anymore. It was about exposing everything that crawled in behind our walls. The HOA, the lies, the rot. Randall didn't waste time. By the next morning, he filed an official motion to expand the scope of the civil suit to include not only Crescent Mesa Ridge HOA and Karen Stryker, but also every board member who had knowingly participated in the illegal enforcement, and the 3 men hired to carry it out. Joel, the remorseful guard, had already signed an affidavit. That gave us legal leverage to start pressing the others. Meanwhile, the detective assigned to our case, Alan, began pursuing criminal charges against Karen: forgery, trespassing, battery, conspiracy to commit unlawful eviction. She tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that protocols were followed. But when asked to produce the HOA board resolution authorizing the eviction, she gave them a PDF that had been created the day after Jessica was thrown out. Big mistake. The file's metadata showed it was edited using a template Karen downloaded from a public HOA management website. It was blank when she printed it. Then came the subpoena for the full HOA governance documents. Randall filed it with the court, and the judge granted expedited access. Public interest was now a factor. The court demanded to see the original HOA boundary agreement, all minutes from board meetings in the last 18 months, any documentation used to expand HOA jurisdiction onto our street, proof of dues, enforcement authority, and legal notices Karen refused to comply. Claimed records were lost during a server migration. Randall didn't even flinch. He filed a motion for contempt. The judge, bless her, gave Karen 72 hours to produce the documents or face fines and possible jail time for obstruction. 2 days later, she miraculously found the records. And what a treasure trove it was. Turns out, Karen had submitted a fake map to the county registrar 6 months prior, one that included our street, an annexation request that had never been approved. She'd forged property owner signatures, ours included. The version she submitted had my name spelled wrong, and Jessica listed under her maiden name, which she hasn't legally used since we got married. The registrar had rejected the expansion due to incomplete owner consent, but that rejection letter had been conveniently shredded. Instead, Karen continued operating as though the annexation had passed. She started issuing notices, demanding compliance, collecting unauthorized dues from confused neighbors, and building her own little dictatorship. 3 more neighbors came forward. One of them, an older woman named Mrs. Ortega, had paid over $800 in compliance fees after Karen threatened to file a lien on her house. Another, a single dad, had been told he couldn't put up holiday lights because they violated HOA aesthetic guidelines. None of them were even in the damn HOA. With Randall's help, we gathered statements from 10 homeowners. By the end of the week, that number had doubled. HOA's so-called power structure crumbling. And while that was happening, the New York Times published their piece, front page, Sunday edition, full spread. The neighborhood that ate itself, how a Texas HOA turned against its residents. by Evan Shaw. Our story was the lead: Jessica's eviction, the forged documents, the unlawful security team, the footage, the pregnancy, the arrest, the humiliation. Every detail was in there, along with interviews from neighbors, the lawyer, even Joel, who went on the record. The article quoted me. "I served overseas, I've worked in high-threat zones, but I never thought I'd come home and find a private group claiming they own my house and my wife's safety." The impact was immediate. National outlets picked it up. Talk shows started discussing the unchecked power of HOAs. Hashtags trended. Our inboxes flooded with stories from other people. Veterans, single moms, elderly couples who'd been bullied, fined, intimidated, or forced out by similar HOA abuses. Randall was contacted by 2 law professors from UT Austin. They wanted to use the case as a study in a course on property rights and private governance. Then came the hearing. Karen showed up with a new lawyer, a fancy one from Dallas who looked like he'd just stepped off the set of a courtroom drama. He tried to argue that the entire thing was a community misunderstanding, that Karen had acted in good faith to protect HOA integrity. Randall tore it to shreds. He presented the forged map and digital metadata, the emails between Karen and her guards, Joel's signed affidavit, Jessica's medical report, the HOA registry's own rejection letter. When Randall finished, the courtroom was dead silent. Karen sat there, mouth tight, skin pale, jaw clenched. Then the judge spoke. She called Karen's actions a gross abuse of private authority, a flagrant violation of individual property rights, and an insult to the integrity of legal governance. She granted the injunction. Karen was prohibited from contacting us, our neighbors, or acting on behalf of Crescent Mesa Ridge HOA until further notice. The HOA itself was placed under judicial review. The room erupted in whispers. Jessica squeezed my hand. Outside, the press waited. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Our house was ours again. And the war wasn't over. It wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. It was a collapse. Not just of an HOA, but of a little empire Karen had built behind manicured lawns and decorative fences. You could smell the fear now. Fear in her eyes, in the way her attorney avoided direct eye contact during hearings, in the way the remaining board members scrambled to distance themselves from her. And then the floodgates opened. Calls started pouring into Randall's office, not just from our neighborhood, but from people in 3 neighboring communities. Homeowners who said they'd been pressured, fined, or outright threatened by the same HOA, sometimes for years. A woman in her 70s who'd been charged late fees for painting her door an unsanctioned shade of blue. A veteran who was told to remove his flagpole because it violated visual harmony. A widower who'd been threatened with foreclosure over a flower bed. They all thought it was legal. They all thought they didn't have a choice. Randall set up a dedicated line, a paralegal team. Within 10 days, we had statements from over 30 families. Many of them had paid compliance fees directly to a PayPal account listed under Karen's maiden name. Some didn't even know they weren't officially in the HOA jurisdiction. Then we got the real kicker. One man, Roger Mins, mid-40s, used to work in municipal planning, came forward with something we didn't expect. A copy of an email Karen had sent to a private management company last year. She'd been trying to get the HOA certified as an enforcement cooperative to secure private funding and expand into nearby developments. The email literally read, "I've found most homeowners won't question an official-looking notice. They comply when you say policy change. We just need to act with confidence." She knew. She knew it was a lie. And she counted on fear and silence to keep it working. We added Roger's email to the growing case file. At this point, Randall wasn't just pursuing the civil case. He was consulting with the district attorney about criminal conspiracy charges. Detective Allen worked in parallel. She'd already served warrants for Karen's emails, HOA internal records, and financial transfers. And what she uncovered was a minefield. Karen had been falsifying HOA meeting minutes. Board meetings she claimed took place never happened. Unanimous votes were forged. Fines were tracked in an Excel spreadsheet labeled Direct Enforcement with color codes next to certain names. Red for non-compliant, yellow for watch closely, green for safe. Jessica was marked red. So was Derek, our neighbor who filmed the original video. So were 3 others who'd filed noise complaints about HOA activities on weekends. This wasn't governance. This was a blacklist. I sat in our living room reading those files, hand gripping my knee so tight I left marks in the skin. She had a system, Jessica said. A whole damn system. And she thought no one would ever call her on it, I replied. That week, we held a town meeting. Not in the HOA clubhouse, they tried to lock us out, but in the local library auditorium. Over 100 people showed up. Some came angry, some came scared, some came just to see if it was real. Jessica stood up first. She told them what happened. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just told the truth. Then others stood. Mrs. Ortega, Roger, Derek, even Joel, the guard, who had the guts to stand up in front of all of them and admit he'd been part of it, and that he was sorry. By the end of the night, 37 homeowners signed onto a group complaint. Randall had to bring in 2 more attorneys to process the paperwork. Crescent Mesa Ridge HOA wasn't just collapsing, it was disintegrating. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing for the class action suit. Karen's team tried to delay it. They filed 3 motions in 48 hours trying to challenge jurisdiction, evidence admissibility, and the legitimacy of our claims. All 3 motions were denied. The judge didn't even blink. And just when we thought we'd seen everything, another bombshell dropped. One of the HOA's preferred vendors, a local landscaping company called Greenview Solutions, was subpoenaed for payment records. Their owner, under pressure, admitted in a sworn deposition that he'd been giving Karen a 15% kickback for every job done in the neighborhood. Mulching, lawn services, fence repairs, sidewalk power washing, anything booked through the HOA, she skimmed off the top. That's when the DA decided enough was enough. Karen was arrested at her home. They perp walked her out in front of cameras. Her hair was in curlers. Her mouth was tight. No comment. No apology. Charges, fraud, conspiracy, unauthorized enforcement actions, criminal impersonation of public authority, and aggravated trespass. The next morning, her mugshot was on the cover of the Austin Statesman and plastered across cable news. Jessica looked at the photo and said, "Still doesn't fix what she did." "No," I said. But now she knows what it feels like to be dragged out of her home. The courtroom was packed, not just with lawyers and witnesses, but with reporters, law students, community activists, even a few folks who'd driven in from other towns just to see it with their own eyes. The judge had ordered additional security, not because of threats, but because interest in the case had reached a point where people were lining up outside at 6 in the morning. This wasn't just about us anymore. This was about every person who'd ever been bullied behind a white picket fence. Karen sat across the aisle from me, flanked by 2 attorneys, one of whom looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She didn't look at me. She hadn't since the day she was arrested. Gone were the heels and blazers. Now it was a gray suit and a pair of stiff eyes that kept darting toward the cameras. The judge called the court to order. What followed was 3 days of relentless testimony. First came Jessica. Randall walked her through every detail. She spoke clearly, steadily. She described how they pounded on the door, how they shoved her, how they yanked her arm so hard it left bruises she could still feel, how she screamed she was pregnant and was ignored. Her voice didn't crack once until she said, "They threw me into the street like I was garbage, and I was carrying our child." The jury looked like they wanted to stand up and apologize to her themselves. Then came Joel, the remorseful guard. He explained the hiring process, how Karen had told them it was a quick job, that the residents were problematic, and that the board had voted unanimously. "I never saw a single document," he admitted. "I never checked if it was legal, I just did what she told me." Next, Randall brought in the neighbors. Derek, who filmed it. Mrs. Ortega, who paid fraudulent fees. The single dad who'd been fined for letting his kid draw chalk art on the driveway. One by one, they painted a picture of quiet terror, how Karen operated like a petty tyrant, using fake rules and invented authority to control people too tired or afraid to fight back. Then came the documents, the forged annexation map, the rejected county filing, the fake meeting minutes, the internal HOA emails with phrases like "increased pressure" and "no need to consult," the Excel spreadsheet tracking targets by color code, the PayPal records, the vendor kickbacks. It wasn't just illegal, it was methodical. Karen's team tried to mount a defense, claimed she meant well, that she believed the expansion was legal, that she had no knowledge the guards used force, that the signatures were errors in digital formatting. They even tried to pin some of it on Lila Monroe, the ex-board member who'd already testified against her. But the nail in the coffin was the video, the one from the body cam. The jury watched the whole thing in dead silence. From the moment the guards got out of the car, laughing and calling Jessica a squatter, to the moment they forced her off the porch, the audio caught her sobbing, screaming, the thud when she hit the concrete, the door slamming, one of them muttering, "That'll teach her." Karen's face during the playback was stone. She didn't blink. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for only 4 hours. They found her guilty on all counts: criminal trespass, fraud, assault, conspiracy to commit unlawful eviction, criminal impersonation, tampering with public records. The judge didn't delay sentencing. 12 years in state prison, she said, with eligibility for parole after 8. This court recognizes not only the physical harm inflicted, but the lasting damage done to the public trust and legal sanctity of private property rights. The 2 guards who hadn't testified got 5 and 6 years respectively. Joel received a suspended sentence and was placed in a diversion program. He hugged his mom outside the courthouse and vanished from the public eye. The HOA officially dissolved. By court order, all remaining funds and assets were liquidated and placed into a restitution fund for the victims. The headquarters, such as it was bulldozed. The neighborhood sign was removed. The Crescent Mesa Ridge name was erased from the county database. Jessica and I were awarded a judgment of $1.5 million, half for compensatory damages, half for punitive, due to the egregious and calculated nature of the offense. When we stepped out of the courtroom, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Jessica held my hand tightly, but neither of us spoke. We just walked, past the microphones, past the cheering neighbors, past the flashing phones. We didn't need to say anything. We'd won, but it wasn't over yet. 3 days after the sentencing, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail, assuming it was a reporter, or worse, another HOA from hell looking to bait me into a comment. But something about it itched at me, so I played the message anyway. This is Evan Shaw with the New York Times. I'd like to speak with you about a follow-up. Your case has started something. I think you should see what you've done. I called him back. He wasn't exaggerating. The original piece he wrote, "The Neighborhood That Ate Itself," had been picked up by over 30 syndicates. His inbox was flooded with messages from readers across the country. He read me a few. A retired teacher in Florida fined for planting sunflowers. A single mom in Arizona evicted over a non-standard fence color. A disabled veteran in North Carolina who lost his house after refusing to pay a driveway maintenance fee. They were all part of HOAs. They all thought what happened to us was impossible, until it wasn't. Evan wasn't the only one calling. A state senator from Texas, Maria Cantu, reached out through Randall's office. She wanted to meet us. We drove into Austin half expecting a photo op and a handshake. What we got was a 2-hour strategy session in a Capitol conference room. Senator Cantu pulled out a binder and laid it on the table. "The Homeowner Autonomy and Oversight Act," she said, "based on your case. We're pushing for legislative hearings next month." The proposal included mandatory transparency for all HOA governance, criminal penalties for unauthorized enforcement, independent oversight boards for disputes, and most importantly, federal-level regulation to prevent rogue HOAs from operating as de facto governments. Jessica blinked. "You're saying this all started because of us?" "No," the senator replied. "It started because the system's been broken for years, but you gave it a face and a voice. By the time we left that room, I realized something. We weren't the only ones who'd been at war. We were just the first to win on camera. The movement took off like wildfire. Hope Freedoms trended nationwide. Advocacy groups formed under the banner of our case. Randall was invited to speak on legal panels, and Jessica gave a televised interview on PBS that went viral for one simple sentence. They told me I didn't belong in my own home. Now they don't exist." The class action suit picked up steam. With Karen behind bars and the HOA officially dissolved, the rest of the board folded fast. Settlements rolled out to dozens of victims. $5,000 here, $20,000 there. For some families, it meant a chance to fix their homes. For others, it meant finally believing someone gave a damn. One afternoon, Evan sent me a draft of a new article. The title hit me like a freight train. From soldier to symbol, how Mark Coleridge sparked a national reckoning on HOA abuse. I didn't feel like a symbol. I still woke up in the middle of the night thinking I heard someone banging on the door. But I read every line of that piece, and I saw what the world saw. A man who didn't back down when they came for his home. A woman who didn't break when they shoved her out. A family that said enough. That same month, Netflix reached out about documentary rights. We said no, not yet. This wasn't entertainment. This, not while people were still fighting the same system we'd barely escaped. But we did say yes to something else. A legal nonprofit. Jessica came up with the name, Home Guard Initiative. Our mission was simple: provide legal resources, advocacy, and media visibility to homeowners under attack from abusive HOAs. Randall became our legal director pro bono. Evan joined as an advisor. Within 2 weeks, we had over 200 emails from people needing help. Some of the cases were worse than ours. An elderly man in Nevada whose HOA had secretly filed for foreclosure over unpaid grass maintenance fines. A woman in Georgia who was fined for hosting her autistic son's therapy dog. A family in Oregon threatened with eviction for putting a Black Lives Matter sign in their window. The deeper we looked, the uglier it got, and the more determined we became. A month after Karen's sentencing, Senator Cantu formally introduced the bill into the Texas legislature. The crowd at the press conference. Hundreds. Jessica stood beside her. I didn't speak that day. I just watched. My wife. My unborn daughter moving in her belly. A crowd of strangers who finally had a voice. And a system that, maybe for once, was listening. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, we were on the offensive. 3 months after Karen was sentenced, Jessica gave birth to our daughter. It was a cool October morning, rare for Texas, and the hospital room was washed in warm, golden light. Jessica held her first, of course. I stood at her side, exhausted, wide-eyed, fingers trembling over the tiny fists that clenched around nothing and everything all at once. We named her Hope, not because it sounded poetic, but because by the time she was born, that's exactly what she represented. To us, to our neighbors, to strangers from other states who'd written to say our story gave them the courage to fight back. The day we brought Hope home, the street was quiet. No HOA signs, no patrols, no warnings taped to our door about mailbox height or seasonal decor violations. Just a few neighbors standing respectfully nearby. Mrs. Ortega waved from her porch. Derek gave us a thumbs up. The silence was finally ours, but the work wasn't done. Home Guard Initiative was growing faster than we could handle. We had to hire 2 assistants just to manage intake. Lawyers volunteered from around the country. Retired judges offered consulting. And Randall, God bless the man, kept showing up in courtrooms like it was a hobby. I started giving talks. Not flashy, not political, just plain truth. VFW halls, legal clinics, community forums. I told people what happened to us, step by step. And every time I did, I saw someone in the back nodding, finally realizing they weren't crazy, that someone else knew what it felt like to be targeted in your own home. Karen filed an appeal, of course. Her new lawyer tried to claim she was mentally unwell, that she'd been under extreme pressure and didn't understand the legal consequences of her actions. The appellate court denied it in under a week. Her name is now blacklisted from every property governance organization in the state. Word is she's trying to write a memoir from prison. If she does, I hope she spells my name right this time. Meanwhile, the Homeowner Autonomy and Oversight Act passed the Texas Senate, then the House. Governor signed it into law 2 months later. The legislation mandates annual audits for HOAs, public access to records, limits on enforcement powers, and a statewide ombudsman for homeowner disputes. It's not perfect, but it's a start. Other states started copying it. Florida, Arizona, Oregon, even California. One night, after Hope had finally fallen asleep and Jessica was snoring beside her, I stood out on our porch with a cup of coffee and looked out at the street. Same cracked pavement, same quiet cul-de-sac. But everything had changed. We weren't just a case. We were a line in the sand. Later that year, 60 Minutes ran a segment on the battle for the American home. Evan Shaw won a journalism award for his work. Randall got invited to testify before Congress. Jessica was asked to speak at a national summit on private governance reform. And me. I finally registered my own security consulting firm. We focus on HOA abuse prevention and private property defense. It's called Coleridge Home Shield. I never wanted fame. I never asked for attention. All I wanted was to protect my home. Turns out, doing that made it safer for everyone else, too.